début de la rencontre. Oui. Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à cette rencontre numéro 20.
Hello everyone and welcome to meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room or remotely using the Zoom application. Before we continue, I would ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to prevent audio and feedback incidents. Please be careful to keep the headsets away from the microphones and do not increase the volume to the maximum. All these measures are to help protect the safety and participant of everyone, including the interpreters. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand function, and if you're in the room, please raise your hand to speak. Today we have a very important meeting. We're starting our new study on business risk management programs in Canada's agriculture section. And today we have with us from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Francesco Del Bianco, Director General, Business Risk Management Directorate, and Stephen Jurgutis, Director General, Policy Planning and Integration Directorate. And I believe you'll begin. Mr. Jurgutis, you have the floor.
Business risk management programs and the development of Canada's next agriculture policy framework. Canadian producers in the agri-food sector operate in a complex and rapidly evolving environment. They face the pressures of global trade disruptions, extreme weather, market volatility, rising input costs, and growing consumer expectations. As you are aware, agriculture and agri-food is an area of shared jurisdiction in Canada. Agricultural frameworks represent decades of collaboration among federal, provincial, and territorial governments. They set shared goals and align investments across key areas, helping to shape Canadian agricultural policy and provide the sector with programs that are both responsive to both the national priorities and regional realities. The current framework, the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, runs until 2028. It is organized across 5 pillars: climate change and the environment, science and research and innovation, market development and trade, building sector capacity, competitiveness and growth, and resiliency and public trust. It includes 2 complementary sets of initiatives. Firstly, strategic initiatives that are delivered through both federal-only programs and FPT cost-shared programs that are designed and delivered by provinces and territories. Secondly, we have a suite of demand-driven business risk management programs. These include agri-insurance, agri-stability, agri-invest, and agri-recovery, which are cost-shared between federal, provincial, and territorial governments, and the Advanced Payments Program, which is federal only. BRM programs provide agricultural producers with protection against income and production losses, helping them manage risks that threaten the viability of their farms. They provide an array of complementary solutions for producers to select the approach that best helps them manage their specific risk. Improvements and changes to the BRM suite happen on an ongoing basis to respond to current context and priorities, and in the case of cost-shared programs, must be agreed upon by a minimum percentage of participating provinces and territories. Recent enhancements to BRM programming include temporarily raising the agri-stability compensation rate and payment cap, making pasture-related feed costs an allowable expense under agri-stability, and temporarily increasing the Advanced Payments Program's interest-free limit to $250,000 for all producers for the 2025 program year, and increasing it to $500,000 for canola for the 2025 and 2026 program years. Conformément aux préoccupations.
In line with the committee's interests, the long-term impacts of climate change on business risk management and the integration of climate risk management and climate readiness into the BRM programs has also been a priority. BRM programs are statutory, demand-based programs, and do not automatically expire when the policy frameworks end. However, FPT discussions about BRM do occur as part of the development for each new framework. As the next framework will run from 2028 to 2033, it will be important that it reflect and respond to current and emerging opportunities. Factors such as global economic uncertainty and trade disruptions play a significant role in determining where our focus needs to be. We also have to be mindful that the agriculture and agri-food sector in Canada is diverse, with a wide range of interests that reflect regional and sectoral differences. Collaboration with our provincial and territorial partners is foundational to the framework development process. Ministers and officials have been and will be meeting to advance the work, align the priorities, and build consensus on key decisions. The first anticipated milestone for FPT ministers is to publish a policy statement to communicate their intentions for the next policy framework, or NPF. Engagement is also critical to developing the framework. Minister MacDonald is hosting roundtables across the country to hear from regional associations, producers, and processors, and officials are engaging both in person and through our online survey, and will be hosting a series of national sessions next month. The idea is to inform the vision, priorities, and objectives.
Full engagement with stakeholders and continued strong partnership with provinces and territories. We are committed to developing a framework that meets the challenges of the moment and positions Canada's agriculture sector for long-term growth, resiliency, and success. We look forward to your questions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, ça va être Monsieur.
For our first rounds of questions, we have Mr. Gord. 6 minutes. This is an important study. How many years has the program, that is the Business Risk Management Program, been functional in Canada? Agri-stability and agri-investment have existed since 2008 and have evolved over time. I can give more detail if you like. This is financial risk management that does not necessarily take into account production costs, but does take into account the financial evolution of risks for a business, no matter what the sector. That's fairly complex. And this was put in place to abide by the WTO rules? Yes, that's right. It's in compliance with our WTO requirements. When it comes to international agreements, there are subsidies for agriculture that are allowed, others no, and Canada wanted to have this financial BRM. Has this program specifically been designed by the Department for Canadians, or was it inspired by another country? For Canada, it's a unique program based on based on the tax returns of producers. There's something similar in the U.S., so our program is unique. I have a more technical program now on the Advanced Payments Program. That's part of the BRM program, or suite. It's managed by a third party. Producers have to have a certain amount based on their herd or their breeding, and it may vary. To obtain this money, instead of it coming directly from their financial institution, is instead managed by a group, depending on the province. Many of the producers in my riding cannot take the APP, the Advanced Payment Program, because they have guarantee problems. The credit margin, or the line of credit, requires the guarantee, that is the herd, but the herd is a guarantee for other types of transactions. The first tranche is interest-free. Why can't producers have the option of saying, I'm entitled to $80,000, and rather than going through a third party, the government could directly pay their own financial institution, that is the producer's financial institution? Why do we have this great program, but one that's not universal? Could there be a solution in this next edition? Can you examine that possibility? Answer. We always look at ways to improve programs. In this specific case, under the law, we need a guarantee to set the price. The idea is that when the herd is sold, the idea is to give an interest-free advance so that the herd or livestock can be sold at the best price. But what you're proposing would require changes to the law. We're examining all these options to see how we can improve the program to respond to producers' needs. I think you just need to be careful because the producer's context, is particular. He's stuck between his main creditor, the bank, negotiating with his main creditor, the bank or the province. In Quebec, it's the Financière Agricole, a line of credit with the Financière Agricole, and the line of credit has to be guaranteed, secured. It's not obvious that the first financial institution will want to give up the first entitlement to the herd because the APP, the Advanced Program Payment, wants that first entitlement. The APP might offer $90,000 without a guarantee. The producer needs the entire line of credit, however, and may refuse this interest-free $90,000 per year through the APP program that he could really use because of this dilemma with the two financial options. If there could be a proposal to amend the statute, that would be interesting. If you could elaborate and send this information, what would be required to amend the law so that we could put that information in the statute? So please send our committee an idea of what the problem is in the statute and what you recommend so that we could amend the law so that producers could be entitled to this line of credit and could say to their financial institution, look at Agriculture Canada gives me the possibility of $80,000 interest-free. A short answer, please, or a written answer? We'll answer in writing. Thank you. Or I can answer quickly now. No, in writing. It's always appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Gord. Liberals now.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out today to ask some of the questions about the BRM program. My first question is on agri-insurance. I think that's the largest BRM program that's available. Who's responsible for the design and delivery of the insurance plans in the respective provinces?
Yes, you're correct. Agri-insurance accounts for about 2/3 of the total spend. The collective federal, provincial, and territorial contributions to the suite of BRM programs, and the agri-insurance is delivered by the provincial crown corporations. So, for example, some of the larger ones in Alberta, there's the AFSC, in Saskatchewan, the SCIC. And so they design and deliver the programs. And our responsibility is actually our department is the only department outside of OSFI that has a team of actuaries. And we review those plan proposals to make sure that they're actuarially sound. And what that means is we ensure that the premiums that they're charging producers is sufficient to cover any future indemnities. And then collectively, we subsidize the premium by 60%.
Thank you. So in Newfoundland, I think it's the Newfoundland Labrador government that actually designs and does the...
That's correct.
So in 2024, the audit reported that the programs administration was found to be efficient in only a few provinces. I'm not so sure if it was efficient in Newfoundland and Labrador, and recommend that the department identify and address programs inefficiencies by facilitating collaboration between provinces to share promising designs and delivery practices. Has that been addressed in the various regions?
Yes, I know that all the Crown corporations meet on a regular basis. There's also committees within federal and provincial governments. We have a committee where they meet to share best practices. They meet in person once a year, the cost per contract varies quite largely by jurisdiction, but in part it's because there's sort of a minimum cost to deliver these programs, and as you know, in Newfoundland and Labrador, there's less farmers than in Alberta. So there's also, if you look at a per farmer or per contract, there will be quite a large difference. The administrative costs can range from 400 to several thousand, but they are sharing best practices, and they're also looking on how they can innovate. We're seeing with all the data that's being generated on the farms and the use of satellite technology, they're starting to also explore how they can further improve the administration to reduce the costs for farmers and government.
Also in Newfoundland and Labrador last year, we had a drought, which was significant, impacted almost all commodities in our province, and caused by climate change, of course. What action, if any, has the department taken to ensure agri-recovery can meet the increased demand for disasters caused by climate change?
Well, actually, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we just recently announced an agri-recovery response to help.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. So we worked very closely with our provincial colleagues to put an initiative in place to support the cattle sector, in particular related to feed costs that increased significantly due to the drought. And so we moved very quickly to try and to support them. And then obviously we have the rest of the suite of programs, Agri-Stability, Agri-Invest, and Agri-Insurance for those times of need.
Another issue in our province would be under agri-stability and whole of farm cover, right, and the reference margins. Most of our farms are smaller farms, multi-crop farms, and if they have a good year in one crop, it's offset by if it's a bad year in another crop where agri-stability won't be used. Is there any thought on how we could address that for the smaller farms with multi-crop farms?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in part it goes to so you're correct that small farms are traditionally more diversified. They often have off-farm income, so in a sense they self-insure, and so because they are diversified, they may trigger agri-stability payments less frequently. And their losses may be less deep, so that the amount of compensation they receive might be less, given that they're diversified. I think it speaks in part to what is the intent of the programs. Is the intent to deal with events that threaten, events that significantly impact their operations and threaten their viability, or is it to provide them some additional support on an annual basis? And I think so I think there's discussions, ongoing on how we can continue to improve the suite, and small business is one area that we're looking at.
I might, Mr. Chair, just add
15
as
seconds.
well.
15 seconds.
I just make a comment to that. Like when you mentioned, like some of these farms have off-farm income, it's usually because they need that to subsidise their farming income to survive. So if they had the proper programs, they wouldn't have to have off-farm income. Thank you very much.
Bonne conclusion. Merci.
A good.
Je propose que je puisse faire le tour du bloc.
Thank you. I'll do the Bloc Québécois turn at the end only, if that's fine with you. We'll continue that way if that isn't a problem. If Mr. Barlow arrives, then I will return to my chair, but otherwise we'll continue in that way. So Conservatives, Mr. Bunk, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm just going to start my questioning with strychnine, because as we know, there's a huge problem with the gopher population, or the Richardson ground squirrel population in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and the population has exploded since strychnine was banned by the Liberal government. And I'm just wondering if you could tell the committee how much damage has been done in dollar terms by these gopher infestations.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would say that in terms of the witnesses that you have before you today wouldn't necessarily be the ones who would have the specific information related to what the potential costs might be, but it is something that we could look into and follow up with the committee.
Okay. Well, according to the government's communications department, the CBC, it's $800 million of damage since the ban has been put on. And there's a real concern in Saskatchewan and Alberta that, this could trigger payments through agri-stability and agri-recovery if states of emergency are declared. So this is something that's really of concern to farmers in our area. So we're hoping that the government will put due attention to this, because we're running out of time. On my way to the airport to get here, I saw some gophers out. So we've got about a month left where strychnine will be effective, and this could be huge costs. Right now we know that the federal government subsidizes crop insurance by 60%. So that is something that's being paid by all Canadians, is due to this government's ban on strychnine. So hopefully that message can get brought forward to the ministry. I'm just wondering, will the closures of the scientific centres, will that be brought up at the FPT meeting in Halifax coming up?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Whether or not provincial territorial ministers would raise it, I wouldn't be able to anticipate. What I can say is that the officials level, we have had discussions to explain what has happened in terms of the site closures, and there is ongoing dialogue and conversations, in particular in the provinces where there are closures, to ensure that there's alignment and ongoing discussions about areas, particular where there's shared facilities or areas of research that have been done in common, to make sure that there's discussions and a path forward on those things.
Do you know, has there been agreement with or preliminary talks with the provinces?
So there have been some initial conversations, details of which I wouldn't be familiar with for each one, but certainly any time that there is, from the Government of Canada's position, a disposition of property is a very lengthy consultation and discussion process, and a very specific order of things that need to happen over a period of time. I think has been indicated to this committee from the previous appearance by our deputy ministers as well, is that we're making sure that we're keeping all impacted parties well informed and having discussions with them on an ongoing basis.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn my time over to Mr. Epp.
Thank you. Welcome here. Thanks for coming. Obviously, we're kicking off the study of the whole CAP renewal program. BRM is one of those components. So there's 4 more to go. I've got some stuff we'll get to science and innovation, probably not today. I want to start in on the BRM. And as has been already put on the record, crop insurance, agri-insurance is the largest component of that from the spending. It's probably been the most successful as well, given its longevity compared to the other programs as well. So that's where I want to start in. And very shortly, we will get into the weeds as well. But agri-insurance is one of the first that really addresses risk on the farm. It's used by producers to address their risk. Now, governments, when they also deliver those programs, take on risk. So from an AAFPC perspective, it's funded 60-40 with the provinces, and with most crop insurance plans, it's 60-40 government producer, so 36-24-40, with the government picking up the admin. AAFC, is the risk split for delivering the programs? Because in theory, we're dealing with weather risk, market risk, all sorts of other risks that impact under the program design. Does AAFC feel that they also carry 60% of the risk of the delivery of the program?
As I mentioned earlier, we ensure that the programs are actuarially sound, and so the idea is the premium should cover the indemnities. And in the past, the majority of the provinces have built up a surplus. Though the Prairie provinces in particular, with the last 2 drought years, got hit fairly hard. Some provinces actually purchase reinsurance, so with third-party multinational reinsurers, and so they either do a stop loss or quota share. And then the federal government can also offer a backstop. So we also can act as a reinsurer for the provinces.
Monsieur Epp.
Time is up, but I will continue exactly on this theme in the next round.
Parfait. Dans 5 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, in 5 minutes, the Liberals, you have 5 minutes. Mr. McDonald, you have the floor.
Okay. Sebastian. It's okay. So to touch on my colleague, Mr. Paul Connors, I'm a small producer, and so I do this job so I don't lose my farm. My husband is a paramedic. In the history of my family, no one has ever been able to access ag stability because we are small producers. So it is one of those pieces that it may seem like that is small loss, but it's tremendous when you own a small farm and you go through the drought. We experienced one in Ontario last summer. We're still dealing with the consequences of such. We just purchased hay, really terrible hay for an incredibly expensive price because we were about to run out. And it's, who knows when, we'll be able to start grazing again. So it's one of those things that, like, when we say these things within the government and within the bureaucracy of the government, it's like, it's hard to hear sometimes because the reality on the ground is vastly different, and how challenging and the complexity that I hear from my neighbors who don't even attempt to access ag stability or any of these other programs. So I think it's one of those things that it is becoming harder and harder every day to remain a farm in Canada, especially on the smaller end of things. Even though that's your biggest desire is to support local food economy and across Canada, like the overall food system. So I guess what support can we provide for the smaller farmers so they're able to access these programs easier? Because the complexity is a lot, and sometimes they just don't have the time and energy to put in to the applying to these programs. Is what could we do long term that we can save the viability of our agricultural system in Canada, which does rely on small producers just as it does on our larger producers as well.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I can start an answer and then see if my colleague wants to jump in. I think there is an understanding that, just based on the diversity, size, and operations across the country, that realities are very different for different types of farms, operations, and also size. So as mentioned in the opening comments, we're continuously looking at what are things that we should be thinking about and considering for improvements going forward. So we are actively having conversations. Of course, any changes or potential changes to the business risk suite of programs or anything within the cost shared or development of the next framework is done in collaboration with provinces and territories. So there are discussions that we have ongoing with our colleagues as well to be looking at some of these things. I would say also that important to consider the totality of the BRM suite. I know oftentimes that there's issues that are raised about the effectiveness or applicability of agri-stability in particular, but I think the important thing that we want to make sure we're considering as well is looking at how the whole suite operates together and how it supports in different ways, different types of operations and different sizes of operations. So I think that's one opportunity for us to look at. The other thing I'd say as well is that there are the rest of the programs that fall under the current sustainable cap, which can also be things that are applied for smaller producers as well. So I think when we're trying to look at these things, we're looking at it from a very kind of holistic point of view.
I mean, this program, the programs have continued to evolve. And so in 2023, we increased the compensation rate from 70 to 80%. Then we subsequently announced that increasing it from 80 to 90% for the 2025 year. We've introduced a new model for agri-stability, so producers can file on a cash basis rather than an accrual basis. So we're constantly looking at ways to try and evolve the suite to meet the needs of producers. And I think as Mr. Jagirdas mentioned, in 2028, we're going to have, again, discussions with the province, well, up until 2028, to see how we can continue to meet the needs of producers.
Thank you. So during the 43rd Parliament, the committee recommended the federal government address gaps in provincial agri-insurance plans, particularly for the horticultural sector. The committee reiterated this recommendation in 2024 report. Why do some horticultural producers continue to find it difficult to access agri-insurance in their province?
So the provinces are responsible to design and deliver the programs, and we work very closely with them, and we encourage them to broaden the product offerings to their farmers and ranchers. But we ensure that the programs are actually sound, but it's actually the provinces that design the actual products that are available to producers.
20 seconds, 20 seconds.
Okay. I guess quickly, so when we compare our programs to the U.S. Farm Bill, to the European Union Common, where do we fall in line of like being competitive in the offerings that the U.S., Brazil even, and the European Union provide to their farmers? Because I know the U.S. does a lot of direct to producer, and it's very, very costly. So I guess if you could, in written, it's like, where do we stand in comparison to that, and some things that we could learn and make adjustments for in the benefits and weaknesses in those programs?
Réponse courte, s'il vous plaît. Short answer, please.
Sorry. Sorry. It's okay. There are statistics that show where we are compared to other countries.
Differs. So we'll have to find a way to provide a succinct answer, because that's a fairly significant undertaking.
Encore une fois, si vous avez des données, vous pouvez les écrire au comité.
Once again, if you have data, please send them in writing to the committee. Thank you. Conservatives, you have 5 minutes, Mr. Epp.
Back to agri-insurance and in particular reinsurance. Just going back to COVID and in response to some questions from the other side of the table, during COVID, the Liberal government removed the access to the advanced payment program interest-free limits for spouses who run separate operations, and it obviously negatively impacts primarily women in agriculture, that the most. Is the government considering reversing this policy at all?
So just a point of clarification. So under the advanced payments program, advances cannot be provided to related entities. So if they're using the same home address, the same equipment, there's one advance.
Operations.
Well, there's a test for relatedness.
Okay.
And so there was more a question of ensuring that the administrators were administering the program in consistent with the existing rules.
Right. Okay, let's get back to agri-insurance and reinsurance. As has been put on the record, the federal government provides an oversight or a mechanism prior to, as a contingent of 60% financing of a program, even though they're designed and delivered provincially. The hammer is at the federal level if the design is to be approved in order to attract the 60% co-payment. Is that correct?
As long as it's actually sound, it gets approved.
Right. So if it's been actuarially sound, and obviously both parties have been, would it not follow that when things go to somewhere in the handbasket, that both the federal and the provincial governments carry some of the risk to the program itself?
So the provinces sit on the fund.
Right.
So when those funds are drawn down, they can then borrow from the federal government.
Right. And I believe you characterize that as a reinsurance program, but I think what you just stated is more accurate, is there's a perhaps interest rate reduced loan program. And the example of Alberta in the last couple of years is exactly what's shown, where they've kind of gone through about $5 billion in funds, or was it $5 billion in claims, in a deficit position.
Yeah.
And now, are forced to access the federal program. So it really is a loan problem. But my point in all this is that the entire risk of the fund or of the outcome of the programs lies with the provinces. Is that a fair statement?
The risk is captured in their financial statements.
Correct. So when the provinces go to address some of that risk through the use of private reinsurance programs, my understanding, here's where I'm open to be corrected, is that AAFC has been less than enthusiastic about using that tool at the provincial level to address the risk to provincial treasuries.
There's a cost.
Yes, I understand.
And it's in the tens of millions of dollars to reinsure.
Right.
And so what we'd like to explore with the provinces is there other ways to remove this from their financial statements.
Right.
Quebec has an example where they've been able to do a set aside. Manitoba was exploring that. There's other options in terms of maybe we could pool all the resources at a national level. So we're attuned to that, but we'd like to find ways to support the provinces to reduce the financial risk to their statements while reducing costs to producers.
Right. And so to me, that's exactly what reinsurance does. Yes, there's obviously you're paying a premium. And if the premium is paid 60-40, as I understand it is, when the province is enrolled, in theory to protect their treasuries, but if the risk all remains at the provincial treasury, that is somewhat the federal government paying their share of premiums. Okay? Now, I'm all for having a discussion whether a national private reinsurance program to address all the pools across the country, if that's more efficient, I think that's part of the mandate of this study. But what I'm trying to get at is the federal government open to those discussions where we bring the private sector in and actually protect the treasuries of both the federal government and the provincial governments when it comes to the delivery of agri-insurance?
We're always looking for ways to improve the suite, and it takes the agreement of both the provinces and the federal government. Anything that helps the provinces better manage their risk and reduce the costs to producers is something that we should all entertain. And right now, the provinces can reinsure, and they have been reinsuring, and there's been no suggestion that that's changed at all.
Is the federal government open to considering the use of private reinsurance for their own program to protect their own treasury?
That would be a question to put to the Department of Finance.
Okay, because it's going to lead to a discussion of margin-based agri-stability in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Epp. Vous revenez.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. You'll be back at the next round. Now the Liberals, Mr. McDonald, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today. I'm going to start off asking about measures that may be in the next policy framework to deal with farm secession. It's quite obvious that as we look at an aging population of farmers, some of us have reinvented ourselves here in Parliament Hill, but we all can't do that. So there has to be a transition of farms. There has to be generational renewal. And it's probably more important now than ever as the farms get larger, the operations require sometimes several operators to be successful going forward. So I look at the next policy framework starting from 2028 to 2033 and just wonder, the framers of this policy, are those considerations getting built in terms of succession planning? Provinces do things. They have new entrant programs. They have new farmer programs, but they kind of just are at the tip of the iceberg. The actual requirements of young people entering the industry have never required more capital, more investment. So can you just speak to that for what's been done?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. A few things maybe to consider in this context. I think recently, over the last maybe 6 months or to a year, there have been some changes that have been made in terms of succession planning and capital gains that I think have been quite favorable for the farming sector. So hopeful that those are going to be able to help as well. Certainly, as we have conversations with provinces and territories and with stakeholders. It is something that is raised quite often, and as you rightly state, concerns about capital costs as well as just the implications of being able to transfer to a next generation. So I would say there's a few things that we want to be considering within the next framework. One is that also, as you state, a large portion of, for example, in the current framework, the funding that goes that's the cost shared part, which is the $2.5 billion, is delivered by the provinces and territories. So that fits inside a frame that we agree to as part of the multilateral framework agreement. But then there's a lot of latitude for provinces and territories to decide exactly how they want to apportion and what sort of programs they want to have. So they've got a great deal of leeway, and I would say that there seems to be more interest in considering that as part of things that we need to be thinking about going forward. The other is that, as I'd mentioned, that there are certain tax changes that have helped that have been more positive. The frameworks are only one part of what we as the federal government do within the ag space as well. Same thing for provinces, certainly larger ones. So it's not necessarily that it would be a deliberate, succinct thing within the framework. That is an option, and that'll be something that we'll discuss. But there's opportunity outside of that as well. Work, for example, FCC is doing in this space, and ongoing considerations that we have with them as well as when we develop this framework. So I would say it's probably a multifaceted issue to address, certainly something that's being raised, and certainly something that we're looking at in the context of developing the next frame.
Well, for instance, when you look at the cost of acquiring acres of farmland, something that might work is new farmers getting more ITC credit for buying up farmland to allow for the intergenerational transfer. It would be specific benefit to those individuals that are turning their farms over to a new generation of farmers. And that's something that I would suggest you take a look at. It would help. It would help those retiring. It would help the new generation coming in. I'll move on to something else. When we talk about the next policy framework, we know that innovation and technology adaptation is going to be probably more important, again, than ever before because we're fastly changing the way that we're operating our farms. AI adoption, just the way the equipment is set up today, the cost of the equipment, we have to be more productive with it. I hope that the next policy framework will put more emphasis on innovation and adaptation compared to we're getting there on climate. Farmers have been very quick to adapt climate resilience measures, and we've been doing that for decades, a couple of decades. And my colleagues over there love these comments, but we have. And so we've been achieving things on that front. But what we need to do is help those farmers continue to be competitive, and the only way they're going to do that is more investment in technology and innovation on their farms.
Réponse très courte.
Short answer, please.
Chair, for the question. Certainly, it is something that we're looking at. More than half of the federal-only portion of the current framework goes towards science and innovation. Sector is very interested in having a continuation of that kind of work and recognizing that things continue to evolve and change. There might need to be more consideration put into that space. Also, again, conversations we're having provinces and territories in terms of the cost-shared portion that they have. So certainly science and innovation coming forward is a big theme.
Merci beaucoup. Du côté conservateur.
Thank you, Conservatives. Mr. Epp.
Move on to the next two in the sweep, but let's diverge, only because your comment, you said over half of the federal APF is going towards science and innovation. In the actual results from 2024, you're actually showing a -2 change in sector productivity when you set a growth target of +2. The sector's productivity is actually shrinking. What plans are in the kettle right now to address that differential?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'd say that in terms of the complete science and innovation landscape within the country, certainly a big portion of what we do within the AEFC as the federal government is through our current sustainable cap, but that's only part of the picture. So it's true that in certain areas in terms of advancements for science and innovation, we haven't been, as a country, as advanced as we need to be, and that's part of the reason why we're as well having conversations more actively with the private sector to try to figure out where are the places that AEFC AFC in particular, and provinces and territories should play, and what are the opportunities that exist for a greater degree of investment and advancement to be able to increase that productivity. So it needs to be something that I think that we consider in conjunction not only amongst spending that's done by governments, but also something that's done by private sector as well as universities. One
of the goals in the last APF was 1,100 peer-reviewed papers driving toward that productivity, yet only 129 were achieved. And now we're also talking about cuts in researchers and research stations. How do you reconcile that?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Maybe just on the last comment, I know that you'd had the opportunity here a number of weeks ago to speak with the Deputy and others about some of those changes and cuts that were happening in terms of requirements under SIR. I would say that over time as well, the types of things that are measured or metrics also change. So there's always a consideration as we go into the multilateral framework agreements, for example, to say how are we going to measure that we're reaching success. Previous instances, it might have been number of published papers. Things do evolve over time to try to figure out the most effective, efficient metrics to demonstrate progress in this space. So some of that does shift over time. I will say, as per my earlier comments, science and innovation is emerging as a big theme in the early conversations that we're having about this next framework. And I think a more coordinated approach that includes how we work with provinces and territories as well as private sector is going to be key to that.
Last question on science and tech for today. Just again, on the transfer of innovations and sciences developed within AAFC, the target was 500 to transfer to the sector, 111 were successful, 80% failure rate. So is that a change in metrics, or is that, where's the disconnect there?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't be in a position to speak specifically to those activities.
Table it in writing.
So it could be something that's tabled. Yeah.
I'm going to get back to BRM for a minute and pick up on a comment from my colleague from across the way. And Newfoundland, as I understand, if I heard you correctly, an agri-recovery response was just tabled, and that was in response largely to drought, a very dry situation. Is that correct? Okay. Now, my understanding is that Ag Recovery program, its program parameters were to address circumstances outside that were to be covered under crop insurance or agri-insurance. I still go back with previous itinerations, and agri-stability, or CASE, if you want to go all the way back to 2003. So now, and I understand the issue, but why are we now addressing through agri-recovery things that if programs worked well, I think would be addressed either through crop insurance or agri-stability? Why an agri-recovery response?
Well, in the case of Newfoundland and Labrador, there was no forage insurance.
Okay. So if forage insurance, and it came up earlier, horticultural insurance, okay, also have been challenges to develop agri-insurance programs for because of some of the very nature, which my understanding, the next member of the suite to address that is agri-stability. Agri-stability has worked well in operations that are singularly focused or narrowly focused, maybe. If you're highly into the beef sector or highly into the greenhouse sector, those variations. Where it's really fallen down is in diversified operations, where the uptake has been much more reduced because basically producers are self-insuring to a certain level, or at least they view themselves. Would you agree that that's a fairly accurate characterization?
Yes, so agri-stability is whole farm. And so in the case of Newfoundland and Labrador, for the agri-recovery response, as you know, agri-recovery is a framework.
Right.
So we looked at the situation with our colleagues in Newfoundland, we looked at all the program support available to producers, and then looked if they still had the capacity to manage that event. And the conclusion was no, and that gave us the impetus to put forward a program. As you mentioned, the more diversified a farm, there's offsets. And so in a sense, they're self-insuring because they could have a significant loss in barley, but have a large cattle herd that offsets those losses. And I think it speaks to the fundamental purpose of these programs. Are they?
I know, Mr. Chair, I've been good twice. I just want to say that I'm not opposed to the agriculture to Newfoundland, and I know it's been similar responses. If agri-stability worked better, it would probably reduce the need for agri-recovery program. That's the point I want to get on the record, and we'll come to that in subsequent meetings.
Merci beaucoup, M. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. Madame Chatel, Liberals. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. I'm going to ask 3 questions, rapid fire. If you don't have time, please submit your answers in writing. You are our first witnesses for this important committee study. 3 priorities for the next partnership. What would they, for the next framework, what would they be? I know that you've already started consultations and you constantly consult stakeholders. What are the current shortcomings identified by the department and stakeholders in the current framework? And what would be your suggestions for improving business risk management programs? Thank you for the question. Chair, I can say that we've already had many discussions with stakeholders and with provinces and territories. There are, let's say, 4 priorities. Markets. Markets are a priority. Diversification internationally and here in Canada. Second, competitivity is the most important in a sector. That has been raised by almost all stakeholders. Resilience, not just with regard to the environment, but also financing, and finally, science and innovation. This is a priority that often comes up, not only at the department, but with stakeholders. As for your second question, what's missing in the current strategic framework? I don't know if there's one thing specifically, but program participants often say that it's complex, that they're not sure or it's not easy to take advantage of the different programs. They're not sure how to proceed. That's something we need to consider. They'd like to also see more flexibility, fewer programs with more capacity to meet various objectives. And I'll turn to my colleague for the third question. Honestly, it depends who you're talking to. Every industry, every province is different, has a different viewpoint. Everyone has suggestions on how to improve the framework. It's a question of their priorities. And we look at everything. Do you have an inventory of suggestions that would improve programs? I imagine that with time, you've compiled a good number of suggestions. Perhaps you could share this with the committee. Share what you've heard already from stakeholders. Of course, we'll hear them here as well in our committee, but we're beginning consultations and therefore beginning to accumulate these ideas. Even with provinces, we're just beginning. The ministers will be meeting this summer, and it's now that we're gathering all this information. So perhaps you'll receive more information from your own witnesses.
Est-ce qu'il me reste un peu de temps, Monsieur le Président?
Inaudible. Do I still have more time? Yes. I know that we talk a lot of science and innovation. Witnesses have told us about 2 different models. One for meat, where the sector is really involved in innovation. The Science Cluster for Beef, it's called. And there's also an Australian model. Is this something that we could bring into conversations for the upcoming framework? This is part of the Agri-Science program. There are 2 clusters. The French word is grappe. So we have clusters or projects. We've already started discussions with different sectors that are contributing to the cluster program currently. We know it takes a good time. It takes some time to conduct consultations for the future. The idea is to tackle the concerns or problems in every sector. What type of cluster do we need for the future, in other words? Thank you. As agreed, then, I will ask questions as the Bloc Québécois member for the first 6 minutes. For numerous producers, the BRM programs don't respond to their needs. These are concerns that have been around for several years, many years. In Abitibi-Témiscamingue, a climate station may be kilometers away from a farm that will determine whether they'll receive compensation. And yet they are seeing that their hay isn't growing. How can they obtain the help they need? In recent years, we've seen an increase in events that affect growers and producers, drought or other, and we've also seen international conflicts on the horizon. Can they hope that special programs will be created rather than the BRM programs that will respond to their needs? You cited the example of climate towers or stations. There are many provinces, including Quebec, that are continuing to keep an eye on how their programs are evolving. For example, Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation, which is working in partial partnership with a satellite company called Planet. It can provide much more accurate information than what the weather stations can provide so that the programs meet farmers' needs. As for the programs per se, the suite of programs, we're working with provinces to improve them continually. These discussions are ongoing for 2028. And let's say, for example, in the case of Abitibi West, there was a winter thaw, forest fires, and drought, and yet the programs did not kick in. We met Minister MacDonald at the time. He told us that we give the guidelines. Quebec is the problem. And yet when we met Quebec, they said, well, the government guidelines, federal government guidelines are too strict. This is a ping pong game. It's not to the advantage of the producers. Why invest in these programs? If you save up that money, perhaps you'd be better over 20 years. Some years it works, some years it doesn't. Perhaps you would be better off doing it by yourself. The programs offer a line of credit or guarantee loans. This puts more pressure on producers rather than providing climate change solutions. Do you have something to say? I'm listening. There are regions. There's much talk of regions through the different programs. What is your definition of a region? I think Quebec, that in Quebec's case, it's the province that's the region. It depends on the program. In the case of Quebec, the province administers all the programs: agri-stability, agri-investment, agri-invest, agri-protection, agri-insurance as well. In the other provinces, it's the federal government. In the Maritimes, in Prince Edward Island, it's the federal government, and agri-insurance is taken care of by the federal government for all provinces. How can we ensure that we have a fair portrait of what's happening locally? There are more and more cuts to data production, for example, and science and research. With regard to programs such as agri-insurance, I know that the provinces are continuing to develop initiatives so that the programs can respond specifically to their producers. when it comes to insurance products, everyone is focusing on how to use the available data to better serve farmers. What are the limits of the provinces? For example, if a province decides to enhance the harvest scheme, récolte, if the provinces want to be more generous, is there a limit on the federal side? We want the program to be fair, but we can't be more generous if the province won't allow it. Under agri-recovery, it's 60%. There are certain provinces, including Quebec, Ontario, and also BC. In fact, all provinces at times will add in money. They have provincial programs that they themselves fund. In the case of agri-recovery, it's 60-40 federal provinces, and the provinces have the flexibility to do more if they want. Last question. The government is increasing its interest-free payments to $250,000. Will this program continue? Or did increase it to $250,000 in 2025. Will this continue? This is what the farmers have been asking for some time now. Is the program going to go back to $100,000? This committee has recommended $300,000 be the limit. What will happen with this advanced payment program? You're right. It's currently $250,000. It's supposed to go back to $100,000 under the regulations. We'll ask the minister the question.
Monsieur Epp, point.
Vous avez posé une excellente question lors de notre dernière étude et nous avons envoyé une lettre aux fonctionnaires pour leur demander s'ils étaient en train.
Specifically on the cost of the specific, the savings on the closure of the ag research stations broken down by each site. And we asked that report and all the investments done by each site over the last 10 years. And I'm wondering if the officials would be able to indicate to us whether that's coming to us shortly.
Je ne le considère pas comme un appel au règlement, mais n'empêche que je pense que
I don't think it's a point of order, but the question is pertinent and could wrap up this meeting. Could you please provide this info, this data to the committee?
I don't have any additional information. I know that it has been something that's brought forward to the department, and the department is working on a response. But in terms of timing of that, I don't have any other specifics to share.
Merci beaucoup, M. Curtis. Monsieur Delbiaco, merci pour votre présence très éclairante aujourd'hui. Merci aux interprètes, à l'équipe technique. On va présentement suspendre pour environ 5 minutes pour pouvoir aller dans une séance privée.
We're going to suspend for about 5 minutes to go in camera. Anyone online will receive a new link, and we are going to wrap up our study on beef and pork pricing. Thank you.